Now we're going to talk about perpendicular lines. And perpendicular lines are lines that intersect at a 90-degree angle. So you'll often see a little box that looks like this, and that's what tells us that they are in fact perpendicular. And the slopes of the two lines are opposite reciprocals of each other. So let's look at this sort of purplish line. The slope of that line would be a rise of negative b over a. Negative b over a run of a would be the slope of the purple line. The slope of the blue line would be a rise of a and a run of b. Notice what's happened between these two. So I'm going to move this up here. So forget about this one. Do you see what's happened is the top and the bottom have basically flipped over, and then we've changed the sign. So we flip it upside down, we take it times a negative, and that gives us our opposite reciprocal. So let's take a look. Again, we're going to determine if these are perpendicular. Same way that we did for parallel, I'm going to turn these into slope-intercept form. So my first equation, I'm going to subtract x from each side and get 3y equals negative x minus 15. I'm going to divide everything by 3 to get x equals negative 1/3 x minus 5. I really don't care about the minus 5. My concern is the negative 1/3. Now, let's take a look at negative 1/3. What is the opposite reciprocal of that? Well, if I flip this over, it gives me the 3 on the top and the negative 1 on the bottom, except I also need to change the sign. So I'm changing it from a negative to a positive. So if I look at my second equation and I end up with a slope of 3, I'm going to say that yes, they are perpendicular. So let's try this one. Negative 3x plus y equals negative 1. I would add 3x to each side to get y equals 3x minus 1. The slope here is 3, which is the opposite reciprocal of negative 1/3. So yes, these lines are perpendicular. We're going to follow the same process for this practice. So 2x plus y equals negative 6. Turn this into slope-intercept form. And we find that the slope of this line is negative 2. I'm going to do the same thing on the second one. I'm going to add x to each side and divide everything by 2. And I get y equals 1/2 x minus 2. So my slope here is 1/2. So then the question is, are negative 2 and positive 1/2 opposite reciprocals? Yes, they are. So yes, these lines are perpendicular. To find the equation of a line that's perpendicular, again, we're going to use point slope form, and I'm going to follow the same process to find the slope of this line. But on the last examples, when I was solving for a parallel line, I found the slope and then I used the slope. So this one will be different because when I find the slope of this line, which looks to be 1/3, I'm not going to use 1/3 over here. Because I want it to be perpendicular, I have to do the opposite reciprocal of 1/3, which would be flipping it over and changing the sign. So my new slope is negative 3. That's the one I'm going to use over here. But now it's, y minus my y value equals my slope, x minus my x value. I end up with negative 3x plus 12 on the right. By taking away 1, I get negative 3x plus 11. Here's another for us to try. Again, my goal is to find the slope of the existing equation that I want it to be perpendicular to. I'm going to divide everything by 5 to get y equals 2/5 x plus 3/5. I don't care about the 3/5, I care about the 2/5, which is the slope of my existing line. To write the equation of the line perpendicular, I'm going to find the opposite reciprocal. So I'm going to flip it upside down to 5/2, and I'm going to change the sign from positive to negative. So this is the slope I'm going to use. Y minus my y value, which makes it +3, equals my slope, and then x minus my x value. I'm going to distribute to get -5/2 x. And remember, when I multiply by fractions, I multiply by the top and divide by the bottom. So -2 times -5 is +10, and 10 divided by 2 is +5. That's where I get the +5. Now I'm going to subtract 3. My final equation, y equals -5/2 x plus 2. This is one for you to try on your own. Follow the same process we have been. I would start by turning the existing equation into slope-intercept form. The slope of the existing line is -4. The slope I want to use is perpendicular to that, so it's the opposite reciprocal. I'm going to flip it upside down to make it 1/4 and change the sign from negative to positive. 1/4 is the slope I will use. So y minus my y value, which turns it into +1, equals my slope, x minus -4, which makes it +4. On the right, I distribute to get 1/4 x, and then remember I'm going to take 4 times 1, which is 4, divided by 4, which is 1. I will subtract 1 from each side to get my final answer of y equals 1/4 x. I wouldn't write the +0, but it wouldn't be wrong if you did.